(2003's SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom is not only a game with a lot of syllables in its title, but also one of the best, and simultaneously most frustrating platformers I've ever had the fortune to play. It's amazing how a game can be so addictive that it keeps you hooked for 9 hours, and yet so infuriating at times that I started threatening a fictional yellow sponge with physical violence if he didn't start pulling his shit together. I'm not going to pretend Battle for Bikini Bottom was a breeze for me, because it really wasn't. I don't know whether I'm just getting old and I'm losing touch with platformers, or BFBB, as I'm now going to refer to it as, is supposed to be extremely difficult to get through in places, but either way I struggled. Not at first, of course, and when I initially began my adventure in the delightful underwater town of Bikini Bottom, I was expecting the usual platforming romp. Meet characters from the show, learn some new abilities, and get ready for more difficult challenges to be thrown in my direction as the game went on. And while I was correct in all 3 cases, the issue I found was the difficulty went from enjoy your time playing this fun for all the family game to suddenly, and without warning, we hate children and we like to make them cry. Honestly, it feels like somebody just flipped a switch on me. One minute I'm enjoying the simple navigation and relatively forgiving combat of Goo Lagoon, the next I'm thrown into the bowels of the Murmur and forced to stay on my toes every second of every minute, because one tiny lapse in concentration can result in a long-winded bull puzzle going horribly awry, or SpongeBob being maimed by some nasty robot critter. And from this point on, the game just doesn't let up, resulting in many a death for the poor little sponge, many a hair-pulling session, and many a slamming the controller down in pure frustration. And yet, even with all the floundering I did, the shouting at seemingly unavoidable fuck-ups, and the occasional rage quit, I found myself constantly being drawn back into the world of SpongeBob SquarePants and Friends. Why is this game so bloody addictive? I've played plenty of platformers in the past, but for some reason, this one stands out to me more than any other. It could be the nostalgia that comes with playing a game based on a cartoon series I adored as a kid. It could be because Heavy Iron Studios, the company that developed the PS2, Xbox and GameCube versions of BFBB under the watchful eye of publishers THQ, went through painstaking effort to bring the life, soul, and even humour of the show straight to the game.
You're going to need to learn some new bubble-blowing moves if you're going to journey to the 9th dimension and defeat the giant monkey man.
But all I need to do is figure out how to get rid of these robots.
Or it could just be that it's nice to finally play a platformer that mixes up its formula with each new level. Meaning that even after spending 9 hours on BFBB, not once did I feel like the game was getting stale. Now, as I said, I did struggle at times, but apart from a few areas and situations that I swear had been designed and orchestrated by the devil himself, nothing about this game felt completely unfair. There were moments where I swear the game was deliberately screwing me over, but looking back I realised it was usually because either my timing was off, or I had underestimated the task at hand and bitten off more than I could chew.
Why you bully me?
So yeah, I probably won't be going for 100% anytime soon because I don't think my weak, angry heart could take it, but I can definitely appreciate the kind of game that SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom is, and see why it was popular enough to warrant its upcoming Rehydrated remake, which yes, I will most likely be covering in a review when it comes out. It will be nice to see how the 2 games compare and see what's changed after all. So, the plot of BFBB is fairly bog standard, in keeping with the cartoon and following the trend of most platformers. Plankton is up to his typical naughtiness, and builds a machine that produces robots that'll obey his every command, with the ultimate goal of stealing Mr. Krabs' Krabby Patty formula. Of course, it wouldn't be the lovable Plankton we know if his plans didn't go awry, and sure enough he messes up during the creation of the robots by forgetting to flip the obey switch to the correct setting. They promptly kick him out of the chum bucket and take over the establishment for themselves. Elsewhere at SpongeBob's house, both he and Patrick make a wish for their toy robots to come to life via the power of a magic shell, and given the events that have just unfolded at the Chum Bucket, SpongeBob wakes up the next day believing their wish to have come true. He then receives a fax from Mr. Krabs, who demands SpongeBob collect as many shiny objects as he can find because, well, they're shiny.
You've been, promoted to head shiny object collector.
Wow! A promotion!
And that's about all you get for the story. There'll be occasions where you're given information from characters in order to understand the task at hand, but the main gist of BFB is find as many golden spatulas and shiny objects as you can to open new areas, gain entry to the Chum Bucket, and destroy any robots that get in your way. The world of Bikini Bottom is split into a number of levels that in turn are broken into multiple sections, with each offering their own unique challenges in the form of platforming, puzzles,
What is that?
enemy or boss encounters, and of course tasks to complete, given to you by characters from the show.
Hey, Gary, what's shaking? Wow!
Thankfully, the colossal task of getting Bikini Bottom cleaned up doesn't fall solely on SpongeBob's shoulders, and he'll be helped along the way by both Patrick and Sandy, who can be swapped between when standing in front of a bus stop sign. However, you can only swap to a character who's useful for that level. If there's no need for Patrick, for example, he won't be available to switch to. Each character can perform a basic double jump and melee attack, but each also has their own unique abilities, which will come in handy if you want to explore as much of every level as you can, and in most cases are necessary to use in order to finish said level. The different character abilities are one of the highlights of the game for me, and it's what helps keep BFBB so fresh even after 9 hours of play. It also brings back fond memories of Spyro 3, given that game followed a similar formula in terms of various characters with unique abilities. However, I'd say BFBB handles its characters so much better than Spyro 3. Apart from their respective homeworlds, Sheila, Sergeant Bird, Bentley, and Agent 9 were limited to exploring minigame areas and only rarely could be used in the main levels, making them feel less main cast and more minor side characters. In BFBB, however, you're not stuck as SpongeBob with only the occasional sprinkling of Patrick or Sandy. If you want, you can explore every nook and cranny of a level whilst controlling the half-witted pink starfish dude or the no-nonsense karate-chopping squirrel gal. Obviously, it also depends on how far their abilities can take them in said level, but the same can be said for SpongeBob, so it evens out. Sometimes you can even find interesting and unorthodox ways of finishing a level, simply by abusing that character's particular abilities. Mr. Krabs gave Patrick the task of finding 3 tiki heads and placing them on top of the various switches in order to make the golden spatula above reachable. Now, I looked everywhere for a 3rd tiki head and I could not find it, not even after looking up a guide explaining where it was. And then I thought, well, hang on. Can I try stacking the tiki heads on top of each other and reach the spatula that way? No, surely not. I'm sure the devs thought of that one.
I think we did a pretty good job so far.
I don't know whether this was intentionally designed as such for those who think outside the box, or it was indeed a slip-up in terms of level design, but it certainly makes you wonder how many other areas in the game can be abused in similar ways. In fact, BFBB is popular with speedrunners for just this reason, with the fastest 100% record as of writing this review at 1 hour, 18 minutes and 56 seconds. So most levels in BFBB, bar those based around boss fights, that's a lot of unintentional alliteration, follow the same formula. Get from point A to point B of each section, take out any pesky robots that get in the way, and collect the golden spatula at the end. Sounds like your generic platformer, but what makes BFBB stand out is that every main level is introduced like an episode on the show, with the stereotypical voice of the French narrator who explains what is going on, usually in rather humorous detail.
The rolling green hills of Jellyfish Fields, a place to experience nature at its most raw, and sometimes a bit tender from the stings.
Add in the fact pretty much every character in the game is voiced by their original actor, and you've got a recipe for success. Hearing Squidward's nasally and droning voice,
No, I'm not okay, you barnacle head. Do I look like I'm okay?
or Mrs. Puff's rich low tones,
Oh,
Oh, SpongeBob, I'm actually glad you're here, believe it or not.
Certainly gets the nostalgia vibes buzzing. Speaking of buzzing, whenever I talk to Mrs. Puff in the game, she appears to be either high on caffeine or on the verge of a full-blown mental breakdown.
You okay?
But given she has to deal with SpongeBob on a regular basis, I suppose that's not surprising after all these years. Unfortunately, and for reasons unknown, Clancy Brown, one of my favourite voice actors by the way, didn't reprise his role of Mr. Krabs for BFBB.
Where's me formula, Plankton?
And as admirable an effort as he puts in as the booming, cackling voice of Mr. Krabs, Joe White just doesn't quite sound right in the role.
SpongeBob, this flapping robot crisis is making the Krusty Krab lose money like a sinking ship.
Like a reheated Krabby Patty? You've been foiled again!
Now, golden spatulas aren't the only collectible item of the game, and if you're going for 100%, you'll also need to find all of Patrick's missing socks, as well as collect enough of the game's main currency, shiny objects, to either give to Mr. Krabs in exchange for golden spatulas, or to open up alternative pathways that'll in turn lead to even more collectibles. Shiny objects are flower-like items that vary in worth depending on colour, and can be collected from almost anywhere, on the ground, in tiki crates, dropped off enemies, etc, etc. And given that crates and enemies are in near endless supply, you won't have to worry about running out of shiny objects anytime soon. Now, I did initially go into BFBB with the intention of collecting as much as I could, but some of this stuff is either so incredibly difficult to get to or so well hidden it's nearly impossible to find that trying to track all of it down without a guide handy would be an extremely arduous affair.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
For example, reaching the bottom of a slide minigame isn't the only way to receive a golden spatula. Each slide comes with its own time challenges, given to you by random characters, and completing these in record time will also net you a golden spatula. Sadly, what could have been a really fun minigame for me was turned into a complete nightmare when I realised just how difficult navigating these slides truly was. I think most of my deaths in BFBB came from the slide sections and anywhere that required SpongeBob himself to turn into a rolling ball. For some reason, I just couldn't get the hang of the controls, even after 9 hours of play. You not only need to turn your character with the left analog stick, but also turn the right analog stick to move the camera around, which will aid in making sharper turns. But if you don't adjust fast enough for the next turn, you're going to sail right off the edge. Couple in the fact your view is often blocked by random bits of the environment, and if you fall off at any point, the timer for the challenge stops, forcing you to have to get to the bottom of the slide just to travel back to the top and restart. Yeah, these mini-games weren't exactly fun for me. There is one positive to this that I have to mention about BFBB, especially as someone who hates retracing their steps in games. Backtracking in levels is made incredibly simple by the addition of cardboard boxes that allow for instant travel. All you have to do is make sure to open both boxes at the beginning and end of each section, and you basically have a free teleportation device that makes backtracking for a missing item a thankfully simple task. As long as you can pinpoint where said item is, of course. I know it sounds like a minor, unimportant detail, and I suppose backtracking doesn't bother everyone as much as it bothers me, but so many developers who make games with massive levels and relatively slow-moving characters never think to include a useful mechanic like this, and even in some cases use backtracking as a way to artificially inflate their game's runtime. So for BFBB to not only keep me entertained for over 9 hours, but to also add in mechanics that make exploring every level and collecting every item quicker and easier.
You have saved our lives. We are eternally grateful.
Sometimes I didn't even care to backtrack anyway, because I was enjoying every little detail these levels had to offer. Now, when I initially started up BFBB, I was slightly put off by the graphics of the game. They're not bad per se, though characters' faces do tend to move rather strangely when they talk.
I have devised an ingenious plan to finally steal the Krabby Patty formula.
What made me so apprehensive was the second I saw it, I thought, oh god, it looks just like Enter the Dragonfly. And while it's not fair to compare games, remembering how awful Enter the Dragonfly looked on occasion made me assume the worst for BFBB. The second I got outside of SpongeBob's house, however, I was pleasantly surprised to find a bright and colourful world that was faithful to its source material. And the more I saw, the more I wanted to keep playing.
Holy Jesus.
Seriously, some of these levels look fantastic. Each one is unique, whilst simultaneously tying all of its sections together, so you get the feeling you're travelling through one huge area, rather than a level broken up into smaller, unrelated pieces. What I love about all the different level designs in BFBB is that nothing seems out of place when you take into account the style of the cartoon series. Now, most levels have actually been designed based on an area from the show itself, such as Jellyfish Fields and Rock Bottom, but there are some areas that have never made an appearance in the show, and yet still feel like they could belong, such as Graveyard Lake, a haunted pit of oozing green liquid, and destroyed pirate ships, which also happens to be the home of the Flying Dutchman.
Who dares disturb the Flying Dutchman?
It's me, SpongeBob, sir.
I don't need any cookies.
By having such unique level designs, both based on the show and completely new in their own right, you have enough variety to make sure the game never gets stale, and a reason for players to make the effort to explore as much as they can, so they don't miss out on any important details or silly little Easter eggs. Something I was pleasantly surprised by was the fact you can see other level locations in the distance. Standing outside SpongeBob's house gives you a clear view of downtown Bikini Bottom, and from certain points in Graveyard Lake, you can see the Chum Bucket, as well as other buildings in the industrial park. It's a tiny addition to the game that goes a long way towards helping the world of BFBB feel connected. Compare that to the level design of the first 4 Spyro games, where most areas were either surrounded by tall mountains or trees to block off view of the horizon, or even used pasty, swirly skyboxes that left the level feeling like it was floating in the middle of nowhere. So really, all I have left to talk about is the combat. I left this last because, to be honest, I can't decide whether I like it or not. In most cases, you'll be fighting robots, who come in all shapes, sizes, and with varying abilities. On top of smacking up any robots that block your path, you'll also need to destroy the Duplicatortron 1000s, else they'll continuously spawn more of the same robots you just dealt with. Now, it's difficult to say whether the combat in BFBB is easy or hard. For one thing, some enemies are a cakewalk to defeat if you're playing the right character. This of course works in the opposite way. If, for example, Sandy is surrounded by multiple spinning robot enemies, she'll have a hard time dealing with them due to being unable to perform a bubble bounce or body slam like SpongeBob and Patrick can, as well as her lasso ability being rather slow to perform. Also, I did feel that hitboxes, both for enemies and characters themselves, weren't always consistent. Sometimes it would appear as if a character's attack would just pass through a robot and do no damage whatsoever. Not a problem if you're only up against 1 or 2 enemies, but see how annoying that gets when you're surrounded by an entire horde of them. To make up for these awkward situations, however, there is health everywhere, in the form of SpongeBob's underwear, which yes, both Patrick and Sandy are forced to use if they want to get their health back up from dangerously low levels. It's the smelly pants or death. Make your choice.
Order up, Squidward!
I suppose at the end of the day, it does come down to skill, and the game is intended for a younger audience. It's not like I didn't take a beating at times either, so I guess I should be grateful there's so much of SpongeBob's hopefully clean underwear lying around. So yeah, I think that sums up my review of SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. There are a couple of things I haven't really mentioned, such as bosses, the ending, and your reward for 100%ing the game, but to be honest, most of you watching have played this anyway, so you know what those particular things entail. And if you are like one of 3 people who haven't played this platforming title, I would actually advise you to give it a go if you can. Now, I did have my gripes with the game, and I did struggle at times, to the point I thought I was going to look like Mrs. Puff by the end of it. but for the most part I did have fun. I am hoping, however, that some of the issues I had with BFBB do get addressed in the Rehydrated remake. I'm sure I read that the developers, Purple Lamp Studios, are adding in content that was originally cut from BFBB and are even looking into some of the more notoriously difficult sections of the game. So let's pray to Neptune that the Kelp Slide gets a serious makeover. So, if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to hit the like button as it lets YouTube know my content is awesome and therefore shows it to more people. And if you want to see more reviews like this, I usually make one a week if I'm not super busy. I tend to cover old games from my childhood or obscure titles that nobody's really played. So if you're into that sort of thing, why not subscribe? Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in whatever I review next. Bye bye! Shout out to top supporters, Klaxon, Thomas Hinton, Ray Zack, Mr. Zugador, Ross Ward, Poplio the Destroyer, Merendor, Trevor, James Townsend, Artemis the Falcon, Hayley Thomas, and Ross Hextall.